I am standing in our garden, and here we have a mixture of both metal as well as wooden garden boxes, and we've had experience working with both of these garden boxes, from setting them up to having a couple years of use with them. So I'm going to do a little comparison of wood versus metal garden beds and which one is truly the best to be building out your raised garden bed. So we'll talk a little bit about each one and where they win and where they lose, and in the end we're going to talk about which one I think is truly the winner and what you should be using when you build out your garden beds. While we're talking about this, I actually have 2 new garden beds that we're adding to our garden that we just got in the mail. So I'm going to be unboxing and setting those up while I'm talking about these. As I'm unboxing this, it seems poignant to talk a little bit about the environmental impact of both of these boxes. So metal definitely is going to be more of an environmental impact in that there is a more intensive process to actually make a metal garden box, especially something like this that comes in a lot of different pieces, and you're definitely going to need more of a factory in order to build this. Whereas wood is definitely going to be more environmentally friendly, especially dependent on the type of wood that you're purchasing. If you are getting even reclaimed wood, or you're using wood from the actual woods or anything like that, fallen down trees that you're stacking, that's going to be a lot more environmentally friendly than, say, purchasing a metal garden box. But if you then think about the longevity and the durability of these, a metal garden box is definitely going to be a lot less maintenance. You're not going to need to do anything really in order of staining or upkeep of your metal garden boxes. They're going to have a really long durability. If you think about it, even some of the water troughs that we have, they're made to be water troughs. They're made to hold water for animals for years and years. So they're really able to withstand a lot of weather, regardless of what it is, holding a lot of water, holding a lot of the muck from the animals originally. And they're definitely just more durable, and they don't really require anything to keep them durable. In comparison to wood, there's obviously a lot more maintenance that goes into them. First thing, you're definitely going to need to make sure that you're setting your wood up to actually withstand a longer amount of time. We decided to use Douglas fir, which we did the Shishibang method, which is actually burning the wood in order to make it last longer. And then we also have been staining it every year since then in order to really drive out the longevity of it. You could use a different type of wood, and there might be different types of methods in order to keep it more durable and keep maintaining it so that it does last longer, but it's really dependent on the type of wood that you use. We did steer clear from actually using a pressurized wood, which could be another solution that would keep your wood lasting longer and require less maintenance, but we were afraid that it would leak any type of chemicals into our garden, and the whole reason we wanted to have a garden was to be more organic, less pesticides, and know what's actually going into our food. So that's definitely something that we wanted to steer clear from. So a lot more maintenance is actually going to go into our wooden beds, and even after 3 years of having this belt, we're starting to see some warpage in them, and we are questioning how long these beds are really going to last, which is not fun when it took us a really long time to build out this garden, and knowing that it could disintegrate or something could happen and upkeep is just so much harder is definitely a negative on the wood garden beds. Another thing to think about with wood is there's definitely going to be more insects, rot, and mold that could happen in your wood garden beds, and that's because you can't always maintain the interior of your wooden garden beds. So something else that you need to be wary of, and you might need to be constantly repairing pieces of wood in your garden bed, whereas a metal garden bed is really not going to have as much rot, insects, or decay as you would get from the weathering that you're getting in wood. Another main differentiator of wood versus metal is going to be the aesthetic. Now, metal garden beds are definitely going to have a more modern, clean look and appeal. And what's really neat about metal garden beds is they definitely are going to be a lot thinner. So you can see here that the metal garden bed on here, this is a thickness of about 0.02 inches, so really thin. So when you're building it out, you're actually going to have a garden bed that's taking up all of the space available in the garden bed. So if you have a much smaller area that you're gardening within, every half an inch is actually gonna be necessary, or you're gonna have to work towards that. Whereas if you have a much larger space, it might not be as important. Now, wood raised garden beds are really nice because they're more of a traditional, natural look. We definitely loved the look of a wood garden bed, and that's why we chose to originally use them in our garden. They have a really nice look and feel to them. They're a lot more traditional. But one thing to think about is, because you're using wood, it's a much thicker surface area than the metal is around the edges, so it can oftentimes take up a lot of the space in your garden bed. Especially if you're working in a small area, it's going to make a big difference. Now, our garden beds, we're using around an inch thickness of wood, so if you think about all 4 sides of that garden bed, that's around 4 inches of space that you're essentially missing on all of the edges. So something to really think about, especially if you're using even a more sturdier type of wood, you can lose a lot of space by just the wood that you're using. Now, you can definitely set this up on your own, but it's probably easier with 2. And as we're setting this up, one thing to think about between metal and wood is the heat absorption. So metal is definitely going to absorb more heat. So if you live in a hotter climate, this can actually be pretty bad for your soil. It can overheat your soil. But if you live in a cooler climate, it won't be as worrisome and probably better helping the soil stay warmer for longer. Whereas the wood beds aren't going to trap as much heat in them, and they're overall probably going to protect your soil a lot better in a warmer climate and keep it a little bit cooler as well. So something to think about depending on your climate, if metal or wood would be better for you. We ended up moving to a table just because it was much easier than bending down in the grass. But in regards to setup, there's definitely a big differentiator between wood and metal. For the first part, you can get the metal troughs that we talked a little bit about, and those definitely are really easy to set up. You're just purchasing them. Some of them already have the bottom cut out, and some of them you can just drill in holes, which is what we did for a lot of our troughs that we have in our garden. In regards to setup from these pieces, a lot of them come in just a few different pieces with some screws, nuts, and bolts, and you really just have to piece it together. And with 2 people, it goes really quick. Whereas a wood garden bed, when we were building out these, the pieces are a lot heavier. You need 2 people. It's literally impossible to do it with 1 person. Chris did assemble some of the smaller boxes on his own, but having another set of hands made the process go by a lot faster. And in general, it was just a lot harder to set those up, especially if you're building out large beds like we did, 16 foot by 4 foot beds, and those were gigantic. It took a lot of time and a lot of work. The last thing to think about is going to be the pricing. And a metal raised garden bed is definitely more of an upfront cost. Wherever you look, I think there's definitely more of a price tag on a metal garden bed, especially if you're looking to get something really nice like the ones that we're setting up today. It can be more costly. Whereas wood is definitely going to be a cheaper option. You have more customization in the shapes, sizes, and what exactly you want to get. But as you decide to change up the wood, there are more expensive versions. The Douglas fir, which is not as susceptible to rot, is a more costly wood. And even just the price of wood today is a lot higher than it used to be a couple of years ago. So in the end, they come up pretty comparable. And when you think about the different maintenance and the wear and tear that they go through, a metal garden bed is going to last you a lot longer with a lot less maintenance costs and replacement costs. Whereas wood garden beds you're gonna need to replace some of the wood, you're gonna maintain it every year. So the price is gonna go up pretty quickly, whereas the metal garden bed is just that one price that you have. In the end, I think that we're definitely going more towards metal garden beds. They've won our heart from the experience that we've had in both metal and wood. Just the longevity, durability and less amount of maintenance is really something that wins in our books, and something that we regret with doing all of our wooden garden boxes. Although they look really beautiful and they set a nice tone for our raised garden bed, in the future, we're definitely going to be moving more towards metal garden boxes. I'll include a link of this one that we specifically set up today in the comments down below. But let me know your thoughts on whether you like wood or metal and what you're deciding to use moving forward. Thank you and have a good one.